Our next speaker is, I think it is Samantha, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, it is. Hi, Samantha. Thank you for your comments and
Thank you.
a nice segue into our next speaker, Samantha Lakin. Dr. Samantha Lakin.
Lakin, yes.
Lakin is a researcher focused on transitional justice and African political history. Her dissertation explored local perspectives of memory. Local perspectives of memory. Lost my place. I'm sorry, everybody. And justice in the aftermath of genocide, specifically in the case of Rwanda. Lakin was a Fulbright Scholar in Rwanda from 2017 to 2018, and in Switzerland from 2011 to 2012, and a graduate research fellow at Harvard's program on negotiation. Since 2013, Dr. Lakin has led numerous action-based research and policy teams in Rwanda, Ghana, and DRC with organizations including the Kigali Genocide Memorial and Aegis Trust, the United States Ambassador's Fund for Cultural Preservation, Search for Common Ground, CDA Collaborative, and Inclusive Security. Dr. Lakin holds a Master of Arts in International Law and Diplomacy from the Fletcher School at Tufts University and a PhD from the Strassler Center for Holocaust and Genocide Studies at Clark University. Welcome, Samantha, to our space.
Thank you very much for having me today. Does everything look okay for this PowerPoint? And yes, okay, great. Sorry, Zoom is a new and fun thing for some of us and a scary thing for others. Thank you again for hosting this conference, first of all. I really want to thank the organizers. I think that this space to present research on a diverse range of topics and the ability to speak with really such esteemed scholars and people working on these issues for me is really an honor. So thank you.
I'm so sorry for interrupting, Samantha. I'm so sorry. Could you play the slides? Are you able to play the slides so that they are more visible? Thank you.
Yes, let me do that. Thank you. I think I have to start them.
Go down to the little at the bottom.
Yeah. Is it this?
There we go. Yeah.
Okay. Does that look better?
Thank you. Yes.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you. So today I'm going to be presenting research titled Memory and Victimhood in Post-Genocide Rwanda, Legal, Political, and Social Realities. And this presentation is based on a book chapter that will be published in an edited volume about narratives in post-atrocity spaces. So that will be coming out with Cambridge University Press, I think in the spring. So again, this is based on the chapter that I contributed. And yeah, I'll get right into it. So I wanted to read one of the quotes from an interview I conducted, and I think this really highlights the feeling of the post-genocide moments in Rwanda right now. Genocide survivors are bound together through a blood pact when the blood of genocide victims was mixed in the waters of the Nyabarongo River. But it's an accidental blood pact, a terrifying twist on the traditional blood pacts in Rwandan culture, pacts that indicated lasting friendship and the strongest of social ties. This pact binds genocide survivors together for the rest of history. So this concept that igihango, these blood pacts, were made out of choice for who is your friend or your family for life, gets flipped on its head as people are intertwined because of what they suffered and what they faced during the genocide. And this is to say that every Rwandan was impacted by what happened during the genocide in 1994, no matter who they were, no matter what their identity, no matter where they were located. I think it's pretty well recognized that everybody was impacted in some way. So just as a framing point. So my research looks at these different perspectives toward post-genocide recovery and justice. in particular looking at processes of memorialization and commemoration to achieve or work toward these kinds of justice, meaning, etc. And so I wanted to present three different perspectives on justice efforts in the aftermath of atrocity, crimes, and genocide, genocidal societies. So South African scholar Brendan Hamburg states that, or writes, as restoring each individual victim to their pre-conflict status is nearly impossible, reparations can only be a good enough response to mass atrocities. In 2014, the 20th commemoration of the genocide, the former Minister of Justice in Rwanda, Johnson Businge, said at the Kigali International Forum, he said, and really asked, what system is perfect to deal with crimes of mass atrocities and genocide? The implied answer is none. And from one interview I conducted in 2015, this interviewee woman said that there's an impact of genocide in the life of every Rwandan. A Hutu is frustrated by what happened by his parents, brothers, and sisters. For a Tutsi, he is a victim of lost parents, brothers, and sisters. Each one in the country has symptoms of the genocide. So memorials are there to show us the reality of the genocide on both sides. And I would say that this today is an aspiration. It's not yet something that has been realized in Rwanda, but it's an aspiration. And just to show a little bit about my own field work, this is an example of a community meeting that took place during a commemoration in 2018 in Kinigi. Ibiganiro kuri jenoside yakorewe abatutsi. So this Ibiganiro conversation, people coming together to commemorate and also to learn. So just a little framing of what this looks like. So I'm going to provide a very basic overview of the methods and then basically get right into the conclusions. There's not a ton of time to go over every specific conclusion and interview, but I did want to sort of provide really a flavor of the discussion of victim identity and how it relates to commemoration after genocide, and then open it up for discussion and further conversation later on. So I conducted this research as part of my doctoral work from 2013 to 2019. Overall, the research is based on 106 open-ended interviews with Rwandan genocide survivors, former genocide perpetrators, so those who were in prison or incarcerated for crimes of genocide, ordinary citizens. So we're talking about those who were not targeted based on their identity, but also who did not participate. Very tough category to locate. And also key informants. So those who work in memorial spaces in Rwanda, who work on issues of justice, who are guides at memorial sites, etc. Archival document review and also participant observation of more than 25 public and private genocide commemoration ceremonies in Rwanda over this time, in English, French, and Rwanda. And just again to show sort of what these looked like in people's homes, sharing, interviewing, talking, etc. Very familiar scene for many of us. So, I think that the literature on victimhood is expansive and has many different perspectives. But what resonated throughout the interviews and in this research was that definitions of victimhood actually influence or impact the ways in which people express their grief, mourn past losses, seek justice, and also access resources in the aftermath of devastation like a genocide. And interviews with Rwandans who lived through the genocide in '94 further captured this narrative complexity around the different notions of victim identity. In particular, how legal, political, and social notions of victimhood influenced people's self-identity and then the ways that they interacted with these commemorations and memorials. And so the question that this paper chapter looks at is, how does victim identity influence or shape the Rwandans' varied relationships to genocide memory, in which I am talking about Kwibuka, which is the sort of official genocide commemoration period in Rwanda, and Inzibutso, the building and maintaining of genocide memorial sites. So I wanted to provide 3 different examples of these relationships to genocide memory. One is genocide memory as a way to facilitate meaning or meaning making, which sometimes happens through the state and through, public and official commemoration, and sometimes it doesn't, and it takes place in private in different ways, which is highlighted more in the research in the paper. And victim identity as well is a dynamic relationship. It's dynamic with social, political, and legal realities. And the Rwandans interviewed showed that they embodied or accepted different types of victim identity as a way to negotiate meaning, going back to the sense of meaning and justice and recognition during the commemoration period. And again, the differences that emerge in public and private commemorative spaces to these goals of creating meaning and being able to seek senses of justice. So in the Rwandan sort of commemorative space, we're talking 28 years after the genocide, within, again, the interviews and just living and working in Rwanda for a long time, a paradox arose, or I saw a paradox come out of these interviews and a lot of conversations, which is that, at times genocide commemoration fosters reconciliation very clearly, while at other times they can be spaces of exclusion. And this question comes up often from people, especially from the outside, and I'm not always able to answer it, especially when people say, oh, in Rwanda, we're not allowed to refer to these past groups that really caused division, caused harms, and that is a completely reasonable thing. And then, I'm teaching at Tufts right now. Students say, but I don't understand. Then when we have the commemoration period in April and people are talking about these groups again, how do people feel when the rest of the year it's one thing and in April it's another thing? So I think that this is a very real dynamic taking place in Rwanda now, that at times commemorations truly do foster reconciliation, and at other times they can create further exclusion, depending again on victim identity and relationship to definitions of victimhood. And so when I looked at this paradox, I thought, and asked, what really can be changed or done to make commemorative spaces be more restorative? I think at the basis, there's an assumption that people want them to be, that Rwandans want them to be, that governments want them to be, et cetera. And so I'm going to work on that assumption to talk about some of the conclusions. So creating more restorative and holistic commemorative spaces. So one example is acknowledging and representing, again, this narrative complexity during the genocide commemoration ceremonies themselves can create symbolic justice processes that are representative of diverse identities and experiences of Rwandans in '94 and after. And Rwanda is not an exception in terms of the fact that perpetrator, victim, bystander categories are not monolithic. They are diverse and they are different. And as much as each individual's relationship to those labels is different, so are within the categories diversity and diversity of perspective that's not always recognized or documented. So one thing to think about are the ways in which different groups, like those who had 2 Tutsi parents and their whole families were killed, or people who may have had one parent who was Hutu and one parent who was Tutsi. Some of the interviews, individuals in that situation found themselves receiving funding from the government and being able to go back to school as if they were a survivor. Others ended up in prison, just depending on sort of the circumstance of what happened in the period. And so looking at, again, these diversities within those groups. And I don't believe Rwanda is an exception there. And second of all, integrating personal remembrance practices, I think is really important, especially when we look at a broader question of, when can a government and a state meet the needs of everybody in the society? And the answer is they can't. Some people will always be unhappy or unsatisfied, but the more that people feel disconnected from national or state-sponsored processes, the kind of more concern we might have about sort of the stability and positive future of the society. And one thing I saw from the interviews is that personal remembrance practices alongside national and public remembrance practices are really important, because people feel that they have the ability to express things that are deeper and that they may not want to share with others outside of who they invite into those spaces. So I'm talking about private prayer services, family gatherings and meals, holding a particular mass at church in honor of victims, or going with neighbors to visit a memorial site and lay flowers and say prayers where a loved one is buried outside of official gatherings. These are, I found, really important because they bring that personal layer of meaning back into many people's experiences. And so these are the two ways that I would say we can look at to begin making more holistic commemorative spaces, especially toward the goals of meaning making. So validating people's experiences and justice as well, providing justice, redress for future, belief in a future where people are protected, people are secure, and there will not be repetition of conflicts or genocide. So I'm going to stop there. Basically, again, this presentation highlights just a little sort of slice of the broader research, of which there are many conclusions. But what I wanted to highlight again today is something that's often spoken about, I think, in a highly politicized way, and that people are not as free to express because they're very concerned that it will be misconstrued or used, especially by an outsider, in a way that was not intended. And I'm not 100% at all free from that. But I do think and hope that those who have entrusted me with their interviews have entrusted me to represent this question and think a bit about that, especially in the scholarly realm, and especially with those of us who are working from different nationalities, different universities, different academic disciplines and backgrounds. I think that this conversation is the beginning maybe of thinking about that in Rwanda. So the last thing I wanted to share is that one quote from an individual who I interviewed said, "There can never be 100% justice in Rwanda after so many innocent people were killed. But we try our best to live with the reality so that genocide never happens again in Rwanda." And actually this photo that was taken, I'm right there, as you can see, I don't look so good, but this photo was taken at the end of my Fulbright experience in Rwanda. And I call it the cultural diplomacy because what essentially happened, which I found really unique, was this was at the end of a couple of weeks of interviews and fieldwork in Kibeho, and an individual actually opened up his home, this is the home, to our team to conduct interviews there so that people could come from wherever they were and sort of not be noticed. It was quite interesting. And at the end, he said, "Let's have a party." I said, "Sure, let's have a party. Let's have some beer and corn and okay." And people came to the party, everyone who had been interviewed over the past weeks from all backgrounds. And it was really, again, an incredible moment, dancing, singing, sharing this beer. And I was surprised that, again, from all different categories, survivors, people who were formerly incarcerated, people who knew each other and who didn't, but all were in the same geographic area, came. And the last thing we did in this conversation or in this, was really just talk. I mean, I said, ask me anything. So we had some really interesting conversations as well about, what's an American doing here, speaking French, Kinyarwanda, et cetera. What do people think about this, that? And so again, I think that this concept of everybody was impacted by the genocide, and the reality is that people do not want that to ever happen again. And how do we look at the different dynamics that are in Rwanda 28 years after and work to ensure that that is a reality? So that is the end of my presentation. I want to thank you again. This is the first time I'm presenting this work in this way, so I really appreciate you receiving that. And I know that I also did not provide any background or whatnot, but just wanted to assume that people had some, level of literacy around what took place in Rwanda during the genocide in 1994, and also genocide studies in general. So I thank you, welcome any questions about the presentation and also about the research in general. And again, I just want to express my gratitude.
Thank you, Samantha. If you can take your presentation down so we can see your face better, that'd be great. Thank you so much. Thank you for the remembering. It's interesting when you show the picture of the community meeting. I'd mentioned before, I was in Rwanda the 25th year and had the pleasure of going to the community meeting. And I understand there's politics around how that happened, but as far as the people go and the process and the experience, it was stunning. And so I'd like to thank you for remembering and bringing these stories to light. So I want to open it up for maybe a couple questions. If people have questions.
There's no way I believe that there's not a single question.
Well, I will. I raised my hand. I guess it's not as visible. Okay, that's okay.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Now just your hand.
All right.
Sorry
Okay. Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you so much, Samantha, for your presentation. It's, just so much to learn. And I appreciate that you went and spent time listening. I think one of the things we do as researchers is to read so much more than spending time with the people and bringing back stories. And I think many people appreciate the story from Anne Kubai, for example. I'm receiving so much feedback about that story. It captured the attention. It brings light, like the reality of the people. And I tell you, Samantha, that last picture where you say everyone came together. I'd like to pause on that. Remember, slaughtering with a machete, that happened. It's real, and we all know it's real. And then to see that picture of people from survivors, from everyone, and I think, I don't know if there were like people who were released from jail among those who participate in the genocide, but they all come together. And I think that, and again, I'm commenting more than asking a question. It's the surprise from the world that they came together eventually, right? So healing is happening. But remember, they had Ubuntu earlier on before genocide. That's the tapestry that they are relying on. It wasn't, as I said, yesterday, it wasn't shattered. It wasn't a glass that shattered. It was just bent. It's a tapestry that was bent, that was torn. It's being fixed again. It's allowing people to go on, to move on together. So, and I think I really like that that picture at the end says it all, because it's hard to imagine as human beings just to let go, to just forgive, right? It's hard to think about, but it's real, it does happen, and they are being an example. And I wish we could hear more stories from there of how they are doing it, right? Because we hear more of how they are killing each other. only in this part of the world, in the West. I hope more stories of how they are succeeding in working together, in really fixing, healing together. And I think there's a phrase you used that I direct, and I promise I won't be too long. There's a phrase where you said, how can we make commemoration be restorative, right? Remembering together, these signs be for everyone, because the pain was experienced by everyone, is being experienced by everyone. So thank you so much for that, your presentation. Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I just see great presentation.
Immaculée.
I'm missing. I'm sorry. Who has? Oh, I'm sorry. Immaculée. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Janine, for noticing. Thank you so much for your presentation, Samantha. It was quite dense, and I enjoyed it. But my question is, maybe I missed it. You interviewed 106 people, right? And among those people, were there Hutus?
Yes.
And Tutsis?
Well, yes, yes.
See. So that's what I wanted to know, because so whenever we hear about the genocide, they say the Tutsi genocide. But the fact that Hutus also lost, and they lost a lot. As a matter of fact, prior to that publicized genocide, there was also a form of killing, genocide happening, and it involved Hutus. So I don't know if those are the ones you interviewed, or if you interviewed those who actually are known to have been victims of that genocide that we know about, because prior to that there were killings.
Sure, yes. So when I went about selecting or trying to find people to interview, I worked with San Femi Church in Kigali in Muhima. I worked with a couple of other churches and organizations, and basically said, I'm looking to speak with people who have anything to say about Kwibuka and Nzibutso, anything at all. I didn't give specifics. And I also asked the people in the community, particularly in Safemi, the person I worked with is a dear friend and a wonderful person. And I said, I'm hoping to be able to speak to people who define themselves as survivors, also people who were imprisoned for crimes of genocide, whether they feel that they were imprisoned rightfully or not, just that they were there. And also what we call like arbitre ordinaire, so people again who were not victimized or targeted because of their Tutsi identity. Essentially, we're talking about people who were Hutu as well, who did not end up in prison. So this stratified sample was difficult to get, but I think, as you said, made the interviews richer. And then again, even on top of that, how do we maybe get candid responses at all? And how do you code a transcript that, may not be candid, or that may be just, a repetition of what the person thinks I want to hear or that they should be saying? How to analyze that as valuable as well. Why did the person produce this transcript as opposed to another? So those considerations are very high in my own work as well. So yeah, I just want to thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you so much. I think I see Mama Barbara Scott's hand up. Yes, sir. Dr. Scott? Okay, and we have a question in the question of answer, and if Dr. Scott comes back on, we'll absolutely recognize her. In the question and answer from Seda, what was the most difficult part of doing research in a country experiencing terrible genocide? Can be somewhere else too, but I'm sure that the difficulties can be the same.
That is a great question. And also the advice to people who want to do this kind of work. I think that the difficulties were many, and I will list maybe 4 of them. One, is trust building, because there, you know, especially in conflict or post-conflict atrocity, you know, crime, genocide settings, there are a lot of people coming in, right? Whether they're journalists, academics, I mean, lots of people from the outside. And so building trust I found to be challenging, but obviously very important. And also making sure that I was acting ethically around victims, survivors, et cetera, that, you know, if, I mean, we hear all the time, you know, people are tired of talking about their story. They don't want to. I mean, that is 150% reasonable. I don't like the term mining data. What are we mining? You know, or that's an extractive term, like literally. So again, I think that was part of the methodological challenge, was trying to figure out where I was in that space and how I might be able to do things in a way that felt responsible to me. I mean, hearing stories obviously is really hard, and the more that you do it and the more that you prepare for interviews, the easier I would say it becomes at the time. I think that listening to transcripts and reviewing the material is when it really hit me, not actually during the interview process. That for me was a professional, let's say, process. I think that other difficulties, people who disclose things that are really hard, I mean, friends and others who were, you know, sexually abused or who have illnesses that they don't want to tell others about, people, you know, with significant financial issues, alcoholism and other things that, again, they don't want to talk about. And oftentimes you cannot do anything about directly. Those are hard. So I'll stop there, but yeah.
Thank you so
and
much.
My advice, just one last thing, my advice to people who want to do this kind of work is just, I think, to prepare as best as you can. And also, you know, talking to and getting advice from those who have done it in the past, you know, exceptional scholars who have done exceptional work in these places. And then also to kind of check in with yourself to see if it's something that you feel you can sustain as a career or not. And if not, that's okay.
Thank you so much, Samantha.